Hi, I'm Pastor Diane of the Living Hope Presbyterian Church in Clifton, New Jersey. Welcome you to this edition of Monday Musings. Today's the third in my series of reflections on the Old Testament book of Esther. Last week I looked at how Esther became queen of Persia and God's part in that process. Well, this section of Esther begins with an event that gives us a glimpse into the communication pipeline between the queen and Mordecai, her cousin and adoptive father. Listen as I read chapter 2, verses 19 through 23 from the Good News translation of the Bible. Meanwhile, Mordecai had been appointed by the king to an administrative position. As for Esther, she had still not let it be known that she was Jewish. Mordecai had told her not to tell anyone, and she obeyed him in this, just as she had obeyed him when she was a little girl under his care. During that time that Mordecai held office in the palace, Bigthana and Teresh, two of the palace eunuchs who guarded the entrance to the king's rooms, became hostile to King Athanasius and plotted to assassinate him. Mordecai learned about it and told Queen Esther, who then told the king what Mordecai had found out. There was an investigation, and it was discovered that the report was true, so both men were hanged on the gallows. The king ordered an account of this to be written down in the official records of the empire. Well, Mordecai was what was known then as a royal courtier who had access to the palace grounds and to those who worked for the king. It tells us that he had an office in the palace. So it would not be unusual for him to be in a place to overhear the plot that he reported on. And as we will see as we go through Esther, Mordecai always had his eyes and ears open, thereby gaining information that he could use or pass on to others, including Queen Esther. So the key takeaway from this vignette is that Mordecai does what he believes is right, without expectation of gaining reward or favor for his actions. Well, chapter 3 introduces us to the villain of the story, Haman. For reasons not revealed in the text, the king promotes Haman over all the other officials in his court to the top of the palace hierarchy. In a sense, he becomes number 2 in command in the entire kingdom. Probably at Haman's own request, the king commanded all those serving in the palace and around outside to bow down and honor Haman. And I imagine this requirement was not well received and was done with much grumbling by many. It surely didn't ingratiate him to those working in around the palace. But not everyone bowed. The story continues. They all did so except Mordecai, who refused to do it. The other officials in the royal service asked him why he was disobeying the king's command. Day after day they urged him to give in, but he would not listen to them. I am a Jew, he explained, and I cannot bow to Haman. So they told Haman about this, wondering if he would tolerate Mordecai's conduct. Haman was furious when he realized that Mordecai was not going to kneel and bow to him. And when he learned that Mordecai was a Jew, he decided to do more than punish Mordecai alone. He made plans to kill every Jew in the whole Persian Empire. Well, although it seems as though Mordecai's refusal to bow and show honor to Haman is solely because he is Jewish, it's quite possible this wasn't the case. Historically, Jews in similar situations bowed to their superiors, and there was no Jewish law against doing so. As a royal courtier, Mordecai would have been required to bow to others, or he wouldn't have kept his job. In addition, for those who study such, and you look at the grammatical structure of the Hebrew text, it separates this clause where he says, I am a Jew, from Mordecai's refusal. So more likely, Mordecai refused to bow to Haman in particular. So Haman used Mordecai's behavior as justification for exacting his revenge on a large scale. He wouldn't really directly punish the offender. Instead, he would exact his revenge on Mordecai's people, the Jews. Having cast the lot, known as the pur, which we'll see is part of the beginnings of the word Purim that is comes out of this particular text of Esther. But having cast that lot to determine the date for the destruction of the Jews to begin, Haman puts his plan into action by going to the king. Here's what the text says. So Haman told the king, "There's a certain race of people scattered all over your empire." Excuse me. Scattered all over your empire and in every province. They observe customs that are not like those of any other people. Moreover, they do not obey the laws of the empire, so it is not in your best interest to tolerate them. If it please your majesty, issue a decree that they are to be put to death. If you do, I guarantee that I will be able to put 375 tons of silver into the royal treasury for the administration of the empire. The king took off his ring, which was used to stamp proclamations and make them official, and gave it to the enemy of the Jewish people, Haman, son of Hammedatha, the descendant of Agag. The king told him, "The people and the money are yours. Do as you like with them." Note that the reasons Haman gives for killing the Jews is that they observe different customs than others in the empire and disobey the laws. Possibly they're an assumption that all of Mordecai's people would refuse to treat him with the respect he felt he deserved, and that the king had commanded be shown. So Haman immediately puts his plan into action. So on the 13th day of the first month, Haman called the king's secretaries and dictated a proclamation to be translated into every language and system of writing used in the empire, and to be sent to all the rulers, governors, and officials. It was issued in the name of King Xerxes, here in the Good News translation, and stamped with his ring. Runners took his proclamation to every province of the empire. It contained the instructions that on a single day, the 13th day of Adar, all Jews, young and old, women and children, were to be killed. They were to be slaughtered without mercy, and their belongings were to be taken. The contents of the proclamation were to be made public in every province so that everyone would be prepared when the day came. At the king's command, the decree was made public in the capital city of Susa, and runners carried the news to the provinces. The king and Haman sat down and had a drink, while the city of Susa was being thrown into confusion. Well, we are all too familiar with stories of persecution, murder, and even genocide directed at a particular group of people because of race, ethnicity, religion, gender, social standing, or other stereotypes. Generalizations applied to a particular group have built literal and figurative walls and justified persecution and murder too often in the history of humankind. Here in Esther, we are confronted with the ordered genocide of the Jews in the kingdom of Persia, people who are singled out to be annihilated because of one man's anger against another, fueled by the desire for power. Echoes of Nazi Germany ring in our minds, or at least they do in mine. For me, it's unfathomable that one person could believe that they have the power to decide the fate of other human beings. Yet, it's happened in the past and still happens today. We're all subject to prejudice and stereotyping of others, even if we don't think that we are. We jokingly refer to those who live on the other side of the tracks. We hold up a figurative measuring stick to those who we see or think act differently or think differently than us. Sometimes we even bend over backwards to include those we think have been marginalized, sometimes at the expense of those we think haven't been excluded, thereby marginalizing them. It's a fine line to walk that we rarely walk successfully. Well, Archbishop Desmond Tutu denounced the evil of apartheid, of this singling out a group of people based on one characteristic, their skin color, and he did so with these words. He says that the Bible declares right at the beginning that human beings are created in the image and likeness of God. This fact endows each person with a unique and infinite value, a person whose very hairs are numbered. And what makes any human being valuable, therefore, is not any biological characteristic. No, it is the fact that he or she is created in the image and likeness of God. Why should skin color or race be any more useful as a criterion than, say, the size of one's nose? It has no more to do with my worth as a human being than the color of my eyes. The worth of a human being is measured by God and not by our human standards. We have no more say about the value of one person over another than we have say about what color a particular bird will be or whether or not it'll rain on our picnic on July 4th. We've heard it said that beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, but experience tells us that ugliness in its many forms is also in that same eye of the beholder. Only God sees every person as beautiful. God makes no distinction between one person or another. Each is of equal value and worth. Each is lovable and loved by God. Although we can't completely see people as God sees them, we can work at it. The first step is to look at each person as a unique individual with the capacity to love and be loved, and to ask God to give you God's eyes as you look. As we continue through the story of Esther, we'll see how things change, how God intervenes in the background to stop this planned genocide of the Jewish people and to use Esther and Mordecai in that process. Well, next week I'm going to be on vacation, so won't be doing my regular Monday musings. So tune in for the next installment on the book of Esther on June 28th. Thanks for listening.